Have you ever smiled but secretly wondered why life turned out the way it did? Have you ever sat back and thought, this wasn't supposed to happen? This wasn't the marriage I planned. This wasn't the diagnosis I expected. This wasn't how I thought my children would turn out. This wasn't the life I prayed for. And if we're honest, sometimes the pain gets so heavy that disappointment starts turning into bitterness. Not because you don't love God, not because you've lost your faith, but because you're hurting. And maybe that's why Naomi's story hit so hard. Because she wasn't evil, she wasn't rebellious, she was wounded. And if we're being honest, a lot of people watching this video are too. Real talk, real faith, real vibes, period. Welcome back to Vonda's Vibe Room. Now, before we jump in, I want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone who faithfully watches each week. Your comments, encouragement, prayers, and support means more than you know. And listen, if you are new here, I'd love for you to subscribe and become part of our community. Every week we have real conversations about faith, life, healing, growth, and how God meets us in every season. This month, we've been in a series called They Were Struggling Too. And today, we're talking about Naomi, a woman who battled bitterness. Let's go to the text. Now, we find Naomi in the book of Ruth, right after the book of Judges, Old Testament. Life starts out normal. She has a husband, she has 2 sons, a future, a plan. But then a famine hits. The family leaves Bethlehem and moves to Moab. And while they are there, everything falls apart. Her husband dies, then both her sons die, one loss after another, one funeral after another, one disappointment after another. And suddenly, Naomi finds herself standing in the middle of life she never imagined. Most people think Naomi's problem was grief, but grief wasn't the deepest issue. Bitterness was. Listen to what she says in Ruth chapter 1, verse 20. Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. Listen, this is one of the rawest statements in the Bible. Naomi literally says, don't call me pleasant anymore, call me bitter. Pain had become her identity, and hurt had become her name. The disappointment had become her story. And that's what bitterness does. Bitterness doesn't just affect what happened, it affects how you see yourself. It convinces you, I'm not the same person anymore. I'm damaged, I'm broken, I'm too hurt, I'm too disappointed, I'm too far gone. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Maybe nobody knows it. Maybe you still go to church. You still post encouraging scriptures. Still smile for pictures. Still tell everybody you're fine. But deep down, you're carrying disappointment. You prayed and it didn't happen. You trusted and got betrayed. You gave your best and you got hurt. You waited and the answer never came. And now you're trying to figure out what to do with all this pain. Because bitterness rarely starts with anger. Bitterness starts with hurt. That's why this episode is called, I'm not mad, I'm hurt. And there are people watching watching right now who don't need another motivational speech. They need healing. Let me be transparent for a minute. This part of Naomi's story hits differently for me because not long ago, the corporate job I had for 26 years was eliminated. Just like that. No warning, no preparation. One day, it was there. The next day, it wasn't. And to be honest, I thought, that was the job that I was going to retire from. I thought I knew how my story was going to end. I thought I knew what the next chapter looked like. But at 60 years old, God turned the page and suddenly I found myself standing in a chapter I didn't recognize. A chapter with questions. A chapter with uncertainty. A chapter where I couldn't see the road ahead. And some days, if I'm being completely honest, this feels like one of the darkest journeys of my life. Not because God isn't good, y'all, but because I can't see what He's doing. I don't know every step. I don't know every answer. I don't know how everything is going to work out. And isn't that where Naomi was? She knew what she lost, but she couldn't yet see what God was building. That's the dangerous place. Because when life doesn't make sense, bitterness starts knocking at the door. Bitterness whispers, look what happened. Look what you lost. Look at your age. Look at your situation. Look at everything that didn't go according to plan. But here's what I've decided. Bitterness will not live here. Not because I have all the answers. Not because I'm never afraid. Not because every day is easy. But because God has been too good to me. I may not know the way, but I know the one who does. I may not see the path, but I know the one who said, Vonda, I am the way. So I'll keep walking. I'll keep trusting. And I'll keep believing. I'll keep showing up, even when I don't understand. Because faith isn't knowing where you're going. Faith is trusting the God who's leading you. And that's what Naomi eventually discovered. God was working in places she couldn't see. Ruth was part of the plan. Boaz was part of the plan. Restoration was part of the plan. Naomi just couldn't see it yet. And every time that I read the book of Ruth, I want to tell Naomi, girl, hold on. Because I read the end of the story. God is about to turn this thing around. And maybe that's what somebody watching needs to hear today. Hold on. The fact that you can't see God's hand doesn't mean He stopped moving. Can I leave you with this? The chapter that hurt you is not the whole story. Naomi thought she was returning home empty, but she had no idea God was already preparing her next chapter. And maybe that's where some of you are right now. You've been calling yourself what your pain calls you. Broken, rejected, forgotten, bitter. But God is still writing your story. Yes, God is still writing your story. Your setback is not your story. Your disappointment is not your final destination. Your pain is a chapter, not the whole book. And just because life didn't go the way you planned doesn't mean God has stopped working. So before you change your name tomorrow, remember who God called you. If this message spoke to you today. Drop a heart emoji in the comments. I'd love to pray for you. And thank you for being part of Vonda's Vibe Room. And remember, they were struggling too. And if God brought them through, He can bring you through too. Woo, let me calm down, y'all. This is good. Amen, Vonda. Amen. Period. This month, we've learned something powerful. Elijah was exhausted. Samson was compromised. The woman at the well was empty. Naomi was bitter. They were struggling too. And yet, God met every one of them.